YN had a special talent, though it wasn't one she ever wanted to list on a resume. She didn't sing, she didn't dance, and she certainly didn't glide through life with grace. Instead, she tripped. She tripped over air, over perfectly flat pavement, and over the invisible hurdles of her own anxiety. That Tuesday morning, the college corridor was a blur of overlapping voices and echoing footsteps. YN walked faster than usual, clutching her bag to her chest as if it were a shield. Her internal monologue was a frantic loop: "Don't be late. Don't drop anything. Please, just for once, be invisible." The universe, however, had other plans. Her toe caught the edge of a stair riser. Gravity took hold. And suddenly her world was in motion. Books took flight, papers fluttered like panicked birds, and her water bottle clattered across the linoleum with a dramatic resonance that seemed to demand an audience. YN froze, knees pressed to the cold floor. It wasn't the sting of the fall that hurt, it was the suffocating silence of the second afterward, the moment when every passing student paused to look. Then, a shadow stretched across the floor in front of her. "Careful." The voice was unmistakable, low, steady, and calm enough to ground her. YN didn't need to look up to know it was Kim Taeyong. He was the senior everyone knew but few understood, the one she admired from the safety of the back row. The one she had spent 3 semesters pretending not to notice. I'm sorry," she blurted out, the words a reflex. Taeyong crouched down, his movements fluid and deliberate as he began gathering her scattered notes. "Why are you apologizing?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting second. "You didn't push the floor." The absurdity of the comment broke through her embarrassment. She let out a soft, genuine laugh that startled even herself. As he handed her the stack of books, their fingers brushed, a brief, electric contact that made her pulse skip a beat. "Thank you, Sunbae." He stood, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "You should slow down, YN." She nodded quickly, her face heating up at the sound of her name on his lips. "Yes. I will." He lingered for a beat longer than necessary, his gaze unreadable, before turning to walk away. YN stood there, hugging her books to her chest, feeling like she'd just finished a marathon. She told herself the same lie she always did: it's just admiration. It doesn't mean anything. YN's sanctuary was the back corner of the lecture hall. From there, she could observe the world without the world observing her back. It was from this vantage point that she noticed the small things about Taeyong. She noticed how he always arrived exactly 5 minutes early. How he never spoke unless he had something vital to contribute. How the air in the room seemed to shift and settle whenever he entered. She never stared, not openly, but she caught the way his sleeves were always rolled to his elbows and the way he pushed his hair back when he was deep in thought. Liking him in silence felt safe. Liking him out loud felt like an invitation for gravity to humiliate her again. One afternoon, a stray pen escaped her desk and rolled under the chair in front of her. As she leaned forward to retrieve it, a hand reached down first. "You drop things a lot," Taeyong said. He wasn't mocking her, he sounded genuinely curious. Her brain stalled. Yes. I mean, sorry." A faint, ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You apologize too much." She wanted to tell him that her clumsiness was a direct result of his proximity. She wanted to say that his presence made her forget how to be a person. Instead, she stayed silent. And, as he handed the pen back, she realized he was looking at her as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. She never expected him to remember her name outside of a classroom setting. So, when a voice called out YN near the vending machines late one evening, she spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. "You left your notebook in the library," he said, holding out the familiar blue spiral binder. She stared at it as if it were made of gold. It wasn't the notebook that mattered, it was the fact that he had seen it, recognized it as hers, and sought her out. "Thank you," she whispered. He tilted his head slightly. "You're interesting, YN." Her heart gave a traitorous thump. "I am?" He shrugged, leaning back against the machine. "You try so hard not to stand out. But people still notice you." He didn't elaborate, leaving the words hanging in the air like a promise. That night, YN lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of his observation pressing down on her. "This is dangerous," she thought. "I should stop." But feelings aren't like faucets, you can't just turn them off because you're afraid of the flood. The first time they walked together, it was a matter of circumstance. A sudden downpour had turned the campus into a gray, misty landscape, and YN found herself stranded under the library awning, having forgotten her umbrella. Waiting? Taeyun was suddenly there, opening a large, sturdy black umbrella. "I'll wait until it lets up," she replied, shivering slightly in the damp air. He looked at the sky, then back at her. "Come. I'll walk you to the bus stop." They walked side by side, the world narrowed down to the small, dry circle beneath the nylon canopy. They weren't touching, but they were close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar and rain clinging to his coat. She watched as he subtly tilted the umbrella toward her, making sure her shoulder stayed dry even if his got wet. "You're quieter today," he remarked, his pace slowing to match her shorter strides. "I'm always quiet." "No," he said softly. "You're just usually nervous." "You're not nervous right now." She glanced up at him, surprised by his intuition. "How do you know?" "Your hands," he noted, gesturing to where she held her bag. "You aren't gripping the straps. Like they're a lifeline." A warm, steady glow settled in her chest, chasing away the chill of the rain. For the first time, the vast distance she had imagined between a senior like him and a girl like her didn't feel so impossible. YN realized then that she wasn't just admiring a distant star anymore. She was falling, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the landing. "Don't have to rush everything." Her fingers tightened around her pen. "I don't know how not to." He studied her face, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You're afraid of falling." A small, self-deprecating laugh escaped her. "I fall all the time, Sunbae. You've seen it." "That's not what I meant," he replied, his voice dropping an octave. For a heartbeat, the world felt like it was tilting. She thought he might reach across the table. She thought he might say something that would rewrite the rules they had lived by. But the moment passed, and the words remained unspoken. She felt a confusing mixture of relief and sharp disappointment. Soon, the campus gossip began to sharpen. People noticed the way he looked for her. They noticed the way she lingered near the stairs. The whispers grew louder. Are they actually close? What does he see in her? Feeling the heat of the spotlight, YN did what she did best, she retreated. She started taking the long way to class. She avoided the vending machines at dusk. She pretended she didn't see him scanning the crowds for a familiar face. He caught her one evening as she was trying to slip out of the arts building. "You've been avoiding me." She forced a practiced, polite smile. "I've just been busy with finals." He didn't look convinced. His expression was shadowed, unreadable. "You don't have to disappear, YN." "If I don't, I'll lose myself," she thought. But aloud, she only said, "I'm fine." Sometimes, distance feels like the only way to keep a heart intact. The realization finally hit on an ordinary afternoon. There was no rain, no swelling music, and no one there to witness it. YN tripped over the uneven pavement near the courtyard. She hit the ground hard, her knees stinging, but this time, no one was there to catch her. She sat there for a moment, waiting for the familiar wave of embarrassment to drown her. But it didn't come. Instead, she realized she wasn't waiting for a hand to pull her up anymore. Hit the pavement. That's responsible. And you? He asked. What do you do when you're unsure? A faint smile touched her lips. I step back before I can fall. Taeyong stopped in his tracks, forcing her to do the same. Yn. If I asked you to stay, would you? Her breath hitched. For a second, she allowed herself to imagine it, the safety of being chosen, the warmth of finally belonging. But she slowly shook her head. Not like this, she whispered. Why? Because I don't want to be someone you almost chose. I don't want to be a hesitation. The gentleness in her voice was what hurt the most. It wasn't a rejection of him, but a quiet, firm acceptance of herself. Weeks passed into a blur of final exams and graduation preparations. Yn threw herself into her life with a new kind of ferocity. She still tripped over the occasional stray cable, and she still apologized more than she needed to, but she had stopped watching the ground. She joined a photography club, stayed late in the studios, and learned the rhythm of her own stride. Taeyong watched from the periphery. For the first time in his life, he was the one waiting. He realized then that he didn't miss her clumsiness or the way she looked up at him with wide, admiring eyes. He missed the way she softened his world. He missed the only person who had ever made him want to lose control. The day before the final graduation ceremony, he found her one last time. He didn't wait for the right moment. Yn, he said, his breath hitching in his chest. I was wrong. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. I thought distance was a shield, he continued, his voice raw. But it only taught me how much room you leave behind when you're gone. I can't promise you forever right now, I don't know what that looks like. But I know I want to choose you today. And tomorrow. The silence stretched between them, thick and expectant. You're late, she finally said. I know. But you came. I did. She didn't smile brightly or blush, she looked at him with a steady, enduring kindness. Then don't ask me to lean on you, she said, reaching out. Just walk with me. They didn't rush to define what they were. Instead, they focused on the mechanics of moving together, learning when to speed up, when to pause, and how to hold a hand without squeezing too tight. One afternoon, as they crossed the courtyard, Yn's foot caught on a stray pebble. She stumbled, and Taeyong's hand flew out instinctively to catch her, but she caught herself first. She steadied her own weight, found her balance, and then, on her own terms, reached out and took his hand. She looked up at him, a mischievous glint in her eyes. See? I didn't fall. Taeyong squeezed her hand, a genuine smile breaking across his face. No, he replied. You just learned when to stop running. Yn was still clumsy, and the world was still full of things to trip over. But as they walked toward the campus gates, she realized she wasn't afraid of the ground anymore. She wasn't falling alone, and for the first time, the slow burn had finally turned into a steady, warming flame. Years later, Yn was still clumsy, she still bumped into the corners of the dining table. She still dropped her phone at least once a day, usually onto her own face while reading in bed. She still apologized to inanimate objects when she walked into them. Some things were simply woven into the fabric of who she was, but other things had transformed entirely. The apartment was filled with the kind of warm, amber glow that only comes from a home that is truly lived in. The scent of dinner lingered in the air, slightly charred, because Yn had become engrossed in a book and forgotten the heat of the stove again. Yn, a voice called gently from the living room, laced with a familiar, patient amusement. You're burning it. I know. She cried, rushing into the kitchen. I got distracted by the ending. Taeyong followed her in, his steps as steady and deliberate as they had been on the day they met. He gently took the spatula from her hand and turned off the burner. Go sit. I'll salvage it. She didn't go. Instead, she leaned against the marble counter, watching him. He was softer now. The sharp, distant edges of the senior she once admired had been smoothed away by years of shared mornings and quiet evenings. "You're staring," he said, not needing to look up to know her gaze was on him. "I still can't believe this is real," she whispered. He turned, leaning his back against the stove, and pulled her into his space. "You've said that every day for 5 years. "I know," she laughed, though her eyes were soft. "I'm just always waiting to trip and wake up from the dream." He stepped closer, resting his forehead against hers, closing the gap that used to feel like an ocean. "Even if you do trip, I'll be right there." "You always are," she murmured, her heart doing that familiar, misbehaving skip, only now, it felt like coming home rather than a warning of a fall. On the side table in the hallway sat a small, modest frame. It was a candid photo from their university days. The background was blurred with rain, two figures huddled under a single black umbrella. They weren't touching in the photo, but the tension and the pull between them were visible even years later. Yan reached out, her hand finding his. The gold band on her finger caught the light of the kitchen lamp. She used to be terrified of falling. She had spent so much of her life watching her feet, terrified that one wrong step would lead to a humiliation she couldn't recover from. She had been afraid to lean, afraid to hope, and afraid to let anyone see the messiness of her stumbles, but Taeyong had taught her that love wasn't about maintaining a perfect, steady gait. It was about having someone who would laugh with you when you slipped and walk beside you until you found your footing again. Later that night, they sat on the balcony. The city lights stretched out before them like a fallen galaxy, and the air was cool and crisp. Yan rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid, rhythmic beat of his heart. "Hey," she said quietly, "If I fall tomorrow," he leaned down, kissing the top of her head. "Then we'll laugh about it over coffee. And if I fall again the day after that? Then I'll be right here to help you up. Every single time." She smiled, her eyes closing in the perfect safety of his presence. Yan was still clumsy. She was still soft, still imperfect, and still prone to tripping over nothing at all. But she wasn't looking at the ground anymore. She was looking at him, and then at the horizon. She wasn't falling. She had finally, beautifully, arrived.